Healthcare applications. So just some things of places that we've seen and noticed large language models being deployed in healthcare. There's the knowledge repository, like I just talked about. A few people are doing it. UpToDate just did it. They just put all of UpToDate inside of a RAG system, put it together, and now you can like talk to UpToDate to ask it questions about stuff. Seems pretty useful for healthcare, just being able to access. There's a lot of medicine. It's really hard to know it all. So being able to query it more efficiently and more accurately would be really, really neat. Another place that it's being used, data extraction. So perhaps if you watched the other module, you know about like the use of data and structured data and unstructured data. One of the ways that you can extract structured data from unstructured data, like taking a patient note and then seeing whether or not a patient was, diagnosed with diabetes. Perhaps it wasn't hard coded, but they talked about it in the narrative for whatever reason. You might be able to extract that using a large language model. And this is one of those cases where, like, do you need a really, really large reasoning model? Can you use a smaller model? We're doing a billion records. Speed is perhaps something that we should consider here. But then again, how accurate is it? So trade-offs. Patient outreach is another interesting one. Chatbots. Should we have patients be talking to chatbots to schedule an appointment, to triage them to see how serious their issue is? Perhaps to just answer questions about insurance and claims, things like that. Do they have questions about, like their medication and how to take it? Are these things that we should be passing on to a large language model as opposed to a healthcare provider? Questions we're still in the process of answering, but things that they could be applied to. Documentation is, of course, the one that people just jump to really, really quickly because it seems pretty obvious. But there it is, generating patient notes, generating summaries for patient visits in perhaps a more readable and understandable format for patients to read. You can have it be part of clinical decision support. You get patient referred to you, you're a specialist, and like they have like a really, really long 15-year history and you can't be bothered to read it all. Maybe perhaps an LLM could summarize it for you and highlight really the important points that are just relevant to your particular specialty, to your procedure that you want to do to help them. And all these things sort of pull things from different areas. You can have agents pull things and read labs and collate things together for you and trend things and all sorts of fun things that you might be able to think of. And then administrative things like medical coding. Very, very laborious task. You have to, again, just like I mentioned before, you have to read a lot of documentation. Did the clinicians document their reasoning behind this? Did they, actually do this procedure but not that procedure? Did they document their rationale correctly so that you can bill to the level that you think the service is deserving of or not? Writing prior authorizations to insurance companies to try and get your patients the drugs that they need. Just taking workload off of the front desk clinicians, things like that. A good question to ask all the time is, what are the challenges with putting LLMs in healthcare? Well, the first and foremost, data privacy and security. Again, like I mentioned, they love to use your data for training. You can pay them money so that they pinky promise not to do it. But even if they pinky promise not to use their patient data for training purposes, you're still transmitting the data over the internet. That needs to be secure. Perhaps this is something that you want to run on premises on your own server so that you don't even move into the internet, so that there's just no risk of the data becoming compromised because you're sharing. Again, this is HIPAA compliance stuff. Is the data, leaving encrypted, unencrypted? They're all things that you need to think about and consider. All very, very, very important. Biases in LLMs. There's a lot of, older medicine that was still on the internet and it's there, and the importance of it perhaps is lost within the training of large language models. Are they going to, bring up perhaps antiquated ideas in medicine? It's all possible because it's just trained on words from the internet. And there's plenty of stuff on there that perhaps we don't want to make it into patient care anymore. And then regulatory landscape. If an LLM-based application that advises on patient care advises poorly or just incorrect, because sometimes even in medicine, you're just wrong. Who gets sued? Right now, it turns out most of these applications are sort of being regulated as medical devices. So then the issue just ends up just becoming like, oh, it's a medical device. It's in the hands of the users. Ultimately, it is them who are put in charge. But if ever this gets automated, then and there isn't a clinician in the loop, well, then who do you sue? Can you sue a computer? Do you sue the company? Yada yada yada. So interesting things to think about. Another direction to take this is if you get a really, 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 really good AI application that, can diagnose stuff, can predict stuff. If a clinician chooses to not use it, is that negligence? Is that the same as like not just like a clinician not using insulin for diabetes care? Again, something to think about. Lots of fun ethical issues come up all the time, and this is constantly evolving, so I'm sure we'll run into more and more problems. Quick practical tips. If you're going to just chat with your LLM and you want to do stuff, and this also applies if you're trying to make an application with a large language model, clear instructions and format it. This is helpful not just for the model, which was trained with a lot of these sorts of clear types of instructions. It's sort of used to it. Like, it just means that it's seen a lot of it. It's part of the training data. It performs better if you give it that sort of formatting, like with bullet points and stuff. And also, it helps you clarify what it is that you want. Like, if you just start typing, like your own chain of thought into ChatGPT, it might get confused because what you wrote down was confused and incoherent. It helps to structure things. Provide it, the proper context. Do context engineering where you're giving it a lot of information. Make sure that you don't just tell it like, oh, write me an essay about Napoleon. Write me an essay about Napoleon after, the second time that he got out of jail. And then with this context and with that context and considering this, and like give it all of the things that you need and that it needs to do this correctly. If that means, pointing it towards documents and articles that you're feeding it, if you want to like sort of make your own RAG or you're using a RAG system, you have to make sure that it has the correct context to produce the output that you're after. Providing examples of the output that you want. Like if you want the output to be like, this is a patient summary. Please tell me, does this patient have diabetes? You can give an example, like this is a sample patient summary, and then after reading it, you should conclude that this patient has diabetes. This patient should not have diabetes. And then give an example of a patient like narrative where there is no evidence of diabetes. And then have clear definitions of the output. What do you want to come out of it? Because it'll always say, that is a great question. You're absolutely right. And talk about this, but maybe that's not what you want for the output. Maybe you just want it to come out with a number. You have to tell it, I want the output to look like this. I want the output to just be a number. It doesn't always do that, but you can certainly try. And then the most important thing that you can walk away with is iterate. What happens a lot of times, you're, chatting away with the LLM and it gives you something and it's not quite right. And you tell it, actually, no, like you did this wrong. Like I wanted it actually more like this. And you're like, oh, great, you're absolutely right. That's a great idea. I should totally do it like this instead. And it gives you another output. And then you sort of correct it a little bit again. After a while, context grows really, really long. Parsing through instructions can get lost in the middle. It's going to be reading and writing a lot of stuff that is produced over and over again, in addition to what you keep telling it. Sometimes it's best to just take all of the lessons from what you learned, because usually what happened is if it produced something wrong, it means that you weren't specific enough. So go back, start a new window, and write in all of the things that you learned from how you prompted it the first time, but this time the output sometimes will end up being better. So try that. Again, the big takeaway from this is that we cannot stop large language models currently from hallucinating and saying the incorrect thing. We've tried lots and lots of different ways. We're still not quite there yet. So be very, very wary, be careful, and hopefully you can come away with this to be armed to be a little bit more cautious and a little bit more skeptical of the things that companies tell you about their fun products. Thank you.